What's up everyone, welcome to this video. In this video we're going to look at AppWrite, which is a backend as a service tool that allows us to build our applications easily. We're going to build a simple application using Python, and we're going to explore the database management functionality that is provided by AppWrite. Besides database management, AppWrite also provides services such as authentication, user management, and storage. So we're going to look at the database management in this video. Lucky for us, AppWrite provides a Python SDK that will make it easy for us to interact with the database that it provides for us. Now, I've talked a lot, and let's get to basically look at what we're going to build. The simple application that we're going to build is a simple to-do API, and it's going to help us to understand how we can deal with AppWrite's database. So AppWrite provides for us a document database, and this document database allows us to keep information in JSON documents, as we're going to see. So what we have basically is a simple CRUD to-do app, and we have one endpoint for getting all to-dos, creating all to-dos. We can retrieve a to-do by its ID. We can update a to-do, and then we can also go ahead and delete a to-do. So let's walk into all those functionalities. So what we're going to do is to first make a request on our endpoint for getting all to-dos. We shall try to execute this, and when we execute, we shall see that this is going to actually return a list of to-do resources that we have kept in our AppWrite database. So just like you can see, it keeps our information in documents, and this information can basically be stored in such a format where we basically have unique IDs provided, and these are sort of hexadecimal values. We have collections in which they are, and also the database ID, as we're going to see. So we can also go ahead and create a new to-do item. So we can come here, and so I'll reset this, and when I try again, I can go ahead and provide some task in here. So let's say do the dishes. So I'll say this is going to be a task for doing the dishes, and I'll say that here I'll just basically provide I hate this task. So what this is going to do is to add a new datetime object of the current time, and then when we execute, to go ahead and basically create our to-do item in our database, so which is to the do dishes part. So even notice that this is a datetime object, but this is stored in the ISO format way, as we're going to see when we are coding. So we can also go ahead and retrieve that specific to-do item that we've created. So I can come here and copy its ID, which is basically this ID right here. So I'll go ahead and copy it, and when I copy it, I'll go ahead and basically try to retrieve that specific item. So I'll come, I'll try it out, and then I'll paste in its ID. And when I execute, it will just basically return all that information about that specific to-do item. So deleting is also going to be the same. So if I want to maybe update that to-do, I can come right here and say that I'll provide the ID, and in here I can basically say do the dishes, or let's say do the dishes, whatever it is, well, and I can come here and also say that the content of this when we're updating is going to be I love to wash dishes. So when we update this, when we execute, we shall see that it's actually going to go ahead and update this to-do item. So we can also go ahead and view that. When you get all our to-dos, we'll now see that our updated to-do item, which is the last to-do item, has been updated, just like you see right here. So we can also go ahead and delete that specific to-do. So what I'll do is to come right here, I'll provide the ID. So I'll actually clear this and then try to execute once again. So if I provide our ID and execute, we shall now see that I actually close this. But what it's going to do is to delete that specific to-do item. And when you try to access all to-dos, now we're going to see or notice that our to-do item will be deleted. So that's basically what we're going to build by using AppWrite's database, and I hope you are going to enjoy this video and learn from it. So the first thing we shall have to do is to head over to the AppWrite website. So this is the website which is found at appwrite.io. So the first thing we shall have to do is to create an account, which I've already created, but what we need to do next is to sign in. So I'll go to the sign in part, and this will basically allow us to access the application. So right here, what we're going to do is to be told or prompted to enter our project name. So for every time we shall need to use AppWrite, we shall need to work within a project that will help us to access the different services that AppWrite provides. So we're going to come here and create a name for our project. So I'll give our name as FastAPI to do, let's say, list. So I'll just basically say to do list. And what this will do is to go ahead and create our project. Now, when you create a project, we shall also need to create an API key that's going to allow us to access the services that we may need to access. So just like you see here, we need to add a platform. Just like when you can be developing a web app, you can go ahead and set your web app to work with AppWrite, or your Flutter app, or even your Apple mobile app, or even your Android app can be set up when you add a platform. But since we are using a server or developing a server app, what we're going to need is to integrate our server to work with AppWrite. So we're going to come to this section where we're going to select API key authentication. So we shall basically create an API key. Now I'm going to give this API key a name. So I'll basically call this FastAPI to do. And I'll set the expiration to never, because I don't really think that we shall need to have this expired for this tutorial. So what I'll do is to go ahead and click next. But if you feel like you want to have security, then what you'll need to do is to set up an expiration date for that specific API key. So let's go on. So what you need to do is to add scopes. So scopes basically give us permissions to the application or to the project, and this basically mark what we are going to do within our project. Now this can be authentication, database, storage, functions, and so on. So in this case, what we need to do is to access our database, but I'll basically go ahead and basically get to select everything that's provided here. So I'll click even on storage and all that stuff. I'll basically create an API key that can allow us to access all things. So I'll go ahead and hit create, and this will basically redirect us to this part of our AppWrite. So now that we've created our application, the next thing we shall have to do is to go ahead and copy our API key and then keep it somewhere safe. Normally what you need to do is to create an environment variable file or keep these as environment variables. So what you're going to do is to go ahead and copy our API key. So basically going to go to our API key section right here, and within our API key section we're going to access the FastAPI to do API key that we've created right here. So I'm just going to come here and copy it. So we basically have a lot of things right here, but what we need is to copy our API key secret, which we can get right here. So I'll just go ahead and click copy. So this will copy our API key. Now I'll head over to my VS Code, in which I have a blank folder, and the first thing I'll have to add is going to be an env file. Now in here, I'm going to create my variables as basically those that can be accessed with keys. Just like I'm going to create my AppWrite API key. So I'll just basically call this the AppWrite API key. And this is going to be equal to the API key that we've got from AppWrite. And the next thing we shall have to do is to also get our project ID. So I head over to AppWrite, and then within our FastAPI to-do list project, I'll have to copy the project ID. So I'm going to go ahead and copy it. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and create another key, which I'm going to call my AppWrite project ID. So I basically come here and say this is going to be our project ID, which is also going to have that value. Now that we've been able to do this, let's go ahead and access our database. So to access our database, we're going to basically follow the documentation, and it's going to provide us some insights on how we can connect to our database or create a database, create collections, and so on. So over here on the AppWrite documentation, what we need to do is to access the application for, or the documentation for using AppWrite with a server application. So I'm going to head over right here. So let me enlarge this a little bit. So what I'll do is to head over to the AppWrite for server. And to get started, they provide some steps that we need to follow. So we need to first of all install the AppWrite SDK for our platform. Remember, we are using Python for this video. So we're going to head over right here and we select the Python section. So we're going to install AppWrite with pip install AppWrite. So I'll copy this command, and when you head over to our VS Code, I'll go ahead and create a virtual environment with Python -m venv. I'm actually in uppercase letters, so let me fix this by Python -m venv, and then this is going to be env. So this will create our virtual environment, which we are going to activate and then install our AppWrite SDK. Now that our virtual environment has been installed, let's go ahead and install the AppWrite SDK. So let's first activate it with source env. So since we're on Windows, our activate script is going to be found within the scripts folder, and then we shall activate our virtual environment. The next thing is going to be for us to install our AppWrite SDK. So I'll paste the command we've copied from the website, and this will go ahead and install AppWrite. So once our AppWrite is installed, we are going to go ahead and basically create a file where we're going to set up AppWrite. So to do that, I'm going to go within our new file and create a new file, which I'm going to call main.py. So inside main.py is where we're actually going to go ahead and set up AppWrite so that we can access our client. So think of a client as the class that's going to allow us to access the different services that AppWrite provides for us. So we're going to head over to the documentation, and after installing our AppWrite, what they need to do is to create a project, which we have already created. Now we need to go ahead and set up our API key, or authenticate with our API key, or actually get access to our app by using our API key. So to do that, what we shall do is to select the Python section right here. So I'll go ahead and copy this code and then paste it within our main.py right here. So what this is doing is basically to show us that we need to, first of all, access the client class. And using the client class, we are going to go ahead and set up our project, which is a project we've created on our AppWrite website. And we shall have to provide our project ID, which we have set as a key right here. We shall also need to set the API key that we got from AppWrite. Now, since these are environment variables, to set them up, what I'm going to do is to use python.env to access them. So the first thing I'm going to do is to head over to my terminal right here. I'll clear it with Ctrl and L, and then I'll go ahead and install python.env. So I'll say pip install python-.env. And this will go ahead and install the version of env that we need. So once we've been able to get that, then I think I'll go to our main.py. I'll close this for now, but I'll also need to show this AppWrite, or actually the editor, where my Python version is installed. So we see that it's showing us Python 3.11.1 that's found within our virtual environment, but it's still saying that our AppWrite could not be resolved. So I think I may need to show it where our virtual environment is located. So let me actually select the interpreter as the one that we have here. Still, it's not resolving our packages. So let me actually close it and reopen it again. And I think this time it will go ahead and see the packages. So once this is done, now let's go ahead and set up our python.env so that we can access the environment variables that we actually installed in our virtual environment. So to do that, I'm going to first import OS. So I'll just say import OS, and after I'll go ahead and also import the load.env function from python.env that will help us use OS to access those specific environment variables. So to do that, I'll say from .env, we are going to import the load.env or load.env function. So what we need is to go ahead and call this load.env function, And when we call it, sometimes we may need to basically describe the .env path to our environment variables. But since they are located within our root folder, then we shall not need to give any arguments to this. So once we've been able to do that, now the next thing we're going to do is to access our API or our keys that we set within our env file. And that is going to be our API key as well as our project ID. So I'll come right here and first of all access our project ID. So I'll say project ID, and this is going to be equal to, so I'll basically come and say it's going to be os.getEnv, and in here what we shall have to do is to specify the key that we use to keep our project ID, which is going to be the Appwrite project ID key. So I'll copy it and then paste it right here. Then I'll do the same thing for our API key. So I'll say API key, and this is going to be os dot, in this case I'll say getEnv, and in this case we shall provide our Appwrite API key just like you see right here. So once we've been able to do this, then the next thing is going to be for us to replace what we've been given at the Appwrite website with the variables that we actually have within our env file. So what we're going to do is to go ahead, so this is not to be tampered with, but what we need is to replace this with our project ID. So I'll just come and say that we shall have our project ID here, and then we shall also have our API key right here. So if we save this and run again, we can actually run this file to confirm if we have successfully connected to our project. So what I'll do is to open my terminal. So I need to still be within my virtual environment. So I'll kill this terminal. All right. So right here in our virtual environment, the next thing we're going to do is to confirm if our connection has worked successfully, or if we've been able to actually integrate our app into our Appwrite. So what we're going to do is to go ahead and say Python main.py, and in case this file runs successfully, then we have successfully been able to connect to our Appwrite or to integrate Appwrite into our app. Now the next thing we're going to do is to access our Appwrite database, or to create an Appwrite database and then go ahead and carry out our specific CRUD functionality on our different to-do resources. Now that we've connected to Appwrite, or we have integrated Appwrite into our Python, let's go ahead and connect to our database. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to create a new module right here, and it's going to be the db.py module. So under this module, we are going to be able to connect to our Appwrite database, create a database, and then be able to create attributes, collections, documents, and so on. So the first thing we shall begin by first of all accessing our client object that we've created right here. And what this is going to do is to allow us to access the database service. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and say from main, we are going to go ahead and import our client object. And this client object is going to be the one through which we shall access all Appwrite services that are provided to us within the SDK. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead right here and access our databases service. So to do that, I'll say from Appwrite.services. So that's where we get access to all the services. In this case, we shall access our databases service, and we shall import the database class, or the databases class that's found therein. So what we're going to do is to go ahead and create an instance of the databases class. So this is going to be our databases, and when we do that, then what we're going to do is to go ahead and provide the client that we created in our main.py file. So in here, what we're going to do is to say that our client is going to be the client instance that we created in here, and to set it up with our API key and project ID. So when you have all that, then the next thing for us is going to be to access the different functions that are provided through the SDK to interact with Appwrite. So the first function we're going to deal with is the one that's going to allow us to connect to our database, or to actually go ahead and create a database. So in here, what I'm going to do is to create our database. So to create our database, let me just create a variable called the result. And this result is going to be a result of creating our database. So to create a simple database in Appwrite, all we have to do is to call this specific function, which is called the create function. And what this takes in is a database ID. So what we're going to do is to create an ID that's going to uniquely identify our database. In this case, I'm going to be making use of the secrets module that's found within Python that allows us to create unique secret digits. So I'm just going to come right here, and all I have to do is to say import secrets. And once I've done that, I'll come right here, and what I'll do is to specify that our database ID is actually going to be secrets.token hex. So I'm going to generate a random hexadecimal value, and I want to give it a number of bytes. So in this case, I'm going to give it 8 bytes only. So once I've been able to do that, I also need to provide a name to our database. So I'll come here and say that the name of our database is going to be, let's say, our to-dos DB. And once I've been able to do that, I'll come right here and basically print our result. So I'll go ahead and print our result. So if I save and run this file, let's see what is actually going to give us. So if I open my terminal right here and say python db.py, in this case, we're going to see that it's going to create our database, and it's going to give us a unique identifier or an ID that we provided right here. It's also going to give us the name of that database, and it's also going to have a timestamp for the date and time at which we created our database, just like you see right here. So to confirm if our database has been created, all we're going to do is to head over back to our console on Appwrite, and we shall head over to the databases section, just like you see right here. So right now we see that the database we've created is our to-dos database. So think of a database as the root of the entire data store that we need to create. And then this database will have collections. Now, since we are dealing with a NoSQL database, a collection is going to represent what we may have as a table in an SQL database or a relational database. So what we need to do is to create a collection and define attributes for that specific collection. So think of a collection as a table that's going to have various rows and columns. And these columns are actually going to be attributes that will be specific to that collection. Now, a document database represents this as objects, or just JavaScript objects that go ahead to store all this data, just like we're going to see right here. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead to our code, and the next thing we shall do is to, so what I'm going to do is to comment this out, but I'm going to basically leave a comment here. So this will be for create our database. And then I'll go ahead and create another comment right here. So this is going to be for create a collection. So this will be for creating a collection for our database. So one thing that we notice is each database has a unique identifier. So shall go ahead and copy our database right here, or our database ID. And then what I'll do is to also basically go ahead and store that in here. So I'll just basically say that we shall have this as our Appwrite DB ID. And then I'll go ahead and paste in that specific unique identifier for our ID. So I'll go within our main.py, I'll add one more variable, and that's going to be our DB ID. So I'll basically read this with os.getEnv, and this will actually be our Appwrite DB ID. So once I've been able to do that, I'll go ahead and basically also make use of that. So where we've imported our client, shall also import our DB ID, just like you see right here. So once we've been able to do that, now the next thing is going to be for us to create a collection. Now to create a collection, it's not going to be so different from what we did by creating our database. All we have to create is a variable. So I'm just going to call this our result variable. And this is going to be equal to a call to the create. So in this case, we are going to access a method called the create collection method. And this will require us to have our database ID. So I'll just basically come and say that our database ID is our DB ID that we created right here. So I'm just going to come and say that our DB ID is what we're going to have right here. The next thing we shall have to do is to provide an ID that's going to uniquely identify our collection. So I just come here and say the our collection ID is going to be still, I'll just provide secrets.token hex, and then in here I'll basically give it 8 bytes, so it will create that specific hexadecimal value with 8 bytes. And once I've been able to do that, then I also need to provide a name for this collection. Now, since this is going to be like a table to store our to-do items, I'll go ahead and call this to-dos, and this will go ahead and create our collection. So I'm going to save, and when we run our file once again, this time we're going to see that it's going to create our collection, and it will return the data that's present for that specific collection. So when you go back here and you try to refresh, we are now going to see that our collection is going to be created, which is actually the one that we have here. So for us to be able to make use of this collection, still we shall need to have its collection ID. So I'm going to copy it and still provide it right in here. So I'm basically go ahead and say AppWrite collection ID. So I'll just keep it in here with AppWrite collection ID, and I'll basically provide that just like you see right here. And once we have that, then I'll also go ahead in our main.py and also provide that as a key. So I'll just basically call this our DB collection ID. And once I've been able to do that, then I'll have to get it from my env file with os.getEnv. And in this case, we shall basically provide that same key, just like we have it right here. So this will be our AppWrite collection ID. So just go ahead and paste it right here. And once we've been able to do that, now the next thing is going to be for us to create attributes on the collection we've been able to create. So think of attributes as the different columns that we may have in an SQL database. Attributes are the specific things that we may need to keep on a specific entity. And in this case, we are going to define those attributes for our specific entity or for our specific collection, which is going to be our to-do table. So for us to do that, I'm going to go ahead and comment this out still. And in this case, what we are going to do is to define a bunch of attributes on our collection. So I'm going to say define attributes. So in this case, we shall be defining our attributes. So to start, what we're going to do is to access our DB object. So shall still create a variable called result, and this is going to be equal to a call. So using our DB instance right here, we're going to access the method that's called create. So in this case, we have a variety of attributes. We can create Boolean attributes, datetime attributes, email attributes, and so on. But the first thing we're going to do is to create an attribute for the title that we need to have on our specific to-do item. In this case, it's going to be a string attribute. So what I'll do is to call it a string attribute. Now this is going to take in the database ID. So this will be our database ID, which is going to be our DB ID that we basically imported from our main.py module. So we're also going to have a collection ID. So I basically say that our collection ID is going to be equal to. So now since all these keys are created here in our main.py, what we shall need is to access them right here. So I'll just go ahead and say import our collection ID and also import our, so we basically have our DB ID and our collection ID, just like you see right here. So once I've been able to do that, then I'll just basically go ahead and provide our DB collection ID right here. I'll say that we're going to have our DB collection ID. So we also need to provide a key, which is basically going to be the name for that specific attribute. In this case, we are going to call our attribute our title. Now, since this is a string, we also need to provide a size for the max length of that specific string. So shall just come here and say that our size is going to be equal to, so let's say the maximum string will be 225 characters. And once we've been able to do that, I'm also going to go ahead and define other attributes. Now we're also going to have another attribute, which is going to be our content or a description of that specific to-do item. So it's going to be similar to what we have here. However, the key will change. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste it right here. So this will basically give us our content. So I'll just basically go ahead right here and provide our content. And once we've been able to do that, then I also go ahead and do the same thing for our date created attribute. So I'll just basically come here and say result is going to be equal to db dot, in this case we shall basically say create date time attribute, which is basically a simple timestamp for us to track the time at which we created our specific to do item. So I'll come right here and say that our database ID will be equal to our db ID, and then we shall also provide our collection ID, which is basically going to be our db collection ID, and then we shall provide the key. So in this case, I'll call this timestamp our date added. So this guy come here and say that this will be our date added, or I basically call it with the snake case naming. So this will be our date added, and then we can also set a default. So in this case, if we want a default, we can basically go ahead and set a default date that will be created for that specific to do item. Or what you can actually do is to not provide a default but specify it to be required. So you can say required equals true, and that is something that I had actually forgotten to set up on this specific two attributes. So what I'll do is to come and copy what we have here. So I'll basically add a comma and then provide a required equals true, meaning we cannot create a document without having to fill in these attributes. Think of it as a nullable constraint when using a relational database. So I'll come right here and say required equals true. Now once I've been able to do this, I'll still run this file to go ahead and create our attributes on our specific collection. So I'll pull up my terminal right here, and all I have to do is to run python db.py, and this will go ahead and create our specific attributes on our specific collection. So let's go ahead and confirm that right here. So if we go to our to-dos collection and we load that up, we shall now see that we have the attributes column right here. So if we go to attributes, we now see that our specific attributes have been added to our specific collection, which is our to-dos collection. Now that we've been able to define our attributes, the next thing is to go ahead and define how we're going to create, read, update, and delete our to-do items. So for us to do that, what I'm going to do is to create a class that's going to basically put all this together so that we can access them by calling a specific object. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to go right in here within our code, and all I have to do is to go ahead, and first thing I have to do is to comment all this out because we are done using them. And then I'll go right here, and all I have to do is to first define a class. So I'm going to call this our class, and this class is going to be our CRUD class. The reason I'm calling it the CRUD class is because it's going to help us create, read, update, and delete items from our database. So this is going to have an initializer class, and this initializer class is what is going to help us to define the attributes that this class will have. So I'm just going to come right here. So I basically provide self, and in here So the purpose of creating this class is to help us to basically go ahead and have our CRUD functionality packaged into one envelope from which we can access them without having to rewrite all this code. I hope it helps. So let's go ahead and set up our FastAPI server to basically expose this functionality via our REST API. So to begin, we are going to go within our files. We're going to create a new file and we shall call this our server.py. So within server.py, we're going to first define our application instance or our FastAPI application instance. But we do not have FastAPI installed, so we're going to first begin by installing it. Now what I'm going to do is to pull up my terminal right here. I'm going to exit this window and then I'm going to go ahead and install our FastAPI. So to begin, I'm going to say pip install FastAPI. I'm also going to go ahead and install UVicon, which is going to be the asynchronous server that's going to handle the running of our server. So I'm going to say UVicon, and this will go ahead and install both FastAPI and UVicon within our virtual environment. Now, once this have been installed, the next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and basically pip freeze these whole requirements within our virtual environment requirements.txt. So I'll just say pip freeze and then requirements.txt, and this will basically keep all the requirements for this project within our requirements.txt, just like you see right here. So now that that is done, let's go ahead and actually build our REST API. So to begin, we are going to go ahead and first set up our FastAPI. So we're going to begin by importing the FastAPI class from FastAPI. So we shall say from FastAPI, we are going to import FastAPI. And once we've been able to do that, we shall create our API instance. So we shall say that app is equal to FastAPI. So we shall provide for this a title, and our title in this case will be equal to, so in this case we shall say simple to do API. We can provide a description, so we shall say that our description is going to be a simple API built using Appwrite. So in this case shall say using Appwrite's database. So in this case shall say Appwrite's database. And then the next thing we shall also define is the docs URL. Now when building an API, you may need a way to present documentation of how the API endpoints work. And the good thing is FastAPI provides these endpoints by using Swagger. So if we go ahead and define our docs URL, this will basically provide the documentation on the root URL or the URL that you may specify via this specific argument. So once we've been able to do that, then the next thing for us is going to be to define the different API endpoints that we are going to have for our CRUD functionality. Now I'm going to write this very fast, so let's begin with the one for retrieving all to-dos. So I'll say app.get. So now that we've defined our endpoints, let's go ahead and run our server so that we go and see our documentation presented. So what I'll do is to save and then open my terminal. So I'm going to run our server with UVicon. So I'll say UVicon. As long as we've installed UVicon, then we get the command for UVicon. So we shall just come and say UVicon, and then we shall point to the app instance. So the app instance is found within our server module and then within our app instance. So we shall come and say server and then point to the app instance. I'm going to also provide an argument right here for reloading our server every time we shall make changes in our code. So if I press enter, this will go ahead and run our server, and it's going to launch at localhost 8000. So if we go ahead and open this app, we shall now go to our browser right here and shall see that our API endpoints are going to be displayed just like you see right here. So now let's go ahead and basically make use of the CRUD class that we created in the previous section. So we shall head over to our VS Code right here, and the next thing we're going to do is to first of all import the CRUD class that we've created right here. That's going to make it easy for us to access these specific CRUD functionalities. So we're going to head over to our server, and then the first thing we shall do is to go ahead and import that class. So we shall say from db we shall import our CRUD class, and once we've been able to do that, we are going to go ahead and create a CRUD object. So we shall come right here and say CRUD, and this is going to give us access to our CRUD object. So once we've been able to access our CRUD object, then we're going to start by first of all listing all our to-dos. So we shall just basically come and say result. Our result in this case is going to be equal to CRUD dot. So in this case, what we're going to do is to say list to-dos, and this will be basically enough to return all the data of our to-dos. So in this case, shall return our result. So shall basically come here and return our result, and this will be enough for us to list all the to-dos that we have within our database. So if we go ahead and try to access this endpoint, so if we refresh and go to our to-dos endpoint, if we try to get all to-dos, this will fetch and return all our to-dos, but we have an error here. So let's go ahead and see what's wrong. All right, so after debugging, I noticed that when I was declaring the CRUD class, I actually made this mistake of adding this comma here. So that basically makes the database ID a tuple, not a string, and that's what we are getting here. That path.replace requires us to have a string, not a tuple. So removing that should actually make us to retrieve our list of to-do items easily. So if I come right here and execute again, we now expect that it should return our to-do items. So let's see actually what error we are getting. So our application has restarted, I think. So if we go ahead and execute this, now we expect that it's going to return an empty list of documents, meaning we do not have any documents within our list of documents. So we need to create some more data. So let's go ahead and implement the one for creating our to-do list items. So to do that, I'm going to head over to our page or our class right here, or actually within our server.py. And the first thing we shall have to do is to define a way for us to create a to-do. So for us to create a to-do, we shall need a Pydantic class that's going to allow us to present data to the API. So what we shall need to do is to define that class. So what I'm going to do is to go and import the Pydantic model or base model class. So to do that, I'll say from Pydantic, we are going to go ahead and import our base model class. It's actually going to be base model, and after importing that class, we are going to go ahead and define that simple class. So this is going to be our to do create model, or can actually call it to do create model, and this is going to inherit from base model. Now after doing this, then we're going to go ahead and define the different fields that are going to be present on this model, or the ways through which we shall provide the data to the API. So in this case, we shall need our title, which shall be a string, and we're also going to need our, so in this case, we shall need our content, which shall also be a string. Then we're also going to need our date added, which is basically going to be a date time. So we're going to add this and say date added, and this is going to be a datetime object. So we are going to specify that this is going to be a datetime object. So that means you are going to get access to that datetime class. So I'll go at the top right here and say from datetime shall import the datetime class. And once we've imported a datetime class, we shall say that our time, actually our datetime object is going to be of datetime, of a type of datetime, but it's not actually going to be a datetime, because what we're going to do is to present this as an ISO format datetime object. So what we can do is to say it's going to be a string, and then we use the field function that's provided by Pydantic to help us basically explain how this default field is going to be. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and import the field function from Pydantic. And once I've imported that, I'll just come right here and then add some more arguments onto this field. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to say field, and in this case, we shall provide a default. And in this case, we shall say that our default is going to be datetime.utc now, which is going to be our current date, time, actually date and time at that specific point. And then, since this is going to be stored in an ISO format or way, we need to call that .ISO format function. So this will go ahead and basically save our date. So once we've been able to do that, I'm going to go ahead and save, and then I'll go to our handler function for creating a to-do. And I have to specify that this will require us to have a to-do, or to have some to-do data that comes from the client. So in this case, I'll come and say I shall have to-do data, and this will be a dictionary of type to-do create model. So once we've been able to get this, then we shall basically do the same thing like we did for listing our to-dos. Shall say that our result is going to be equal to, so in this case, what we shall access is going to be CRUD, which is our CRUD object, and we shall access our create to do method, and this is going to take in the data for creating our to do. So in this case, I'll say that our data is going to be equal to a dictionary, and this dictionary is going to have the specific items that we may need. Now in this case, what we may do is to go ahead and basically provide that data that we may need when creating a to do. So we're going to begin by providing a title, and that title is going to be the data that comes from the to-do data model. Then in this case, we shall access the title just like we defined it there. Then we're also going to go ahead and access the content, and that will also be the same. So this will be to-do data dot content. And once we've been able to get that, then the next thing we should do is to provide the date added. So the date added will be, so this will actually be date added, and that will also be the to do data dot date added, or the data to which you created that specific to do item. So once you've been able to do that, then we're going to go ahead and return the result from our Appwrite, and then we shall also go ahead and define the status code that's going to be returned after creating that specific to do. So to do that, what we shall do is to come right here, and then we shall provide some other argument, which is going to be our status code, and this is going to be our 201 status code, or the one for created. So once we've done this, then let's go ahead and test this on our Swagger UI. So if we go back here and we refresh, we're now going to notice our post endpoint is going to require us to provide a request body, and this is going to have the title, the content, as well as the date added. And you also see that this is going to be a datetime object of an ISO format way. So if we try to create a sample to-do list item, we're going to provide the string. So let's say our title is going to be read the Bible, and in this case we shall basically provide our content. So I'll read Psalms, and then if we go ahead and execute, we we're now going to see we still have an error. Let's see how to debug this. So we actually don't have the document ID, which I forgot. I think we need to go back to our CRUD class. If we go back to our CRUD class, we need to provide that document ID. So say our document ID is going to be secrets dot token hex, and then in this case we shall provide 8 bytes as the number of bytes. We shall also provide a comma right here, and that will reload our server. So if we head over to our browser once again and we try to execute our query or our insertion, we're now going to see that our to-do is created, and basically this is our to-do. So even if we go ahead and get all to-dos, we shall see that this is going to return a list of to-dos, and now we have one document in our database, which is working fine. So let's go ahead and add some more to-dos. So I can go ahead and basically say that I want to go ahead and wash clothes. So I can say that we need to wash clothes and basically wash all the clothes that we have. Wash all the clothes. So I basically provide that as a description, and when I execute, that will go ahead and create that to do. Now let me add some more. So let's say go to bed or something like that. So I'll say go to bed, and here I'll say, and then have some rest as a sample content. So I can go ahead and execute, and when you go right here, we can execute and see that we now have a list of 3 to-do items, which is working great. So if we go ahead and try to retrieve a to-do by its ID, so let's go ahead and implement that specific endpoint. If we go to our code, what we're going to do is to access that specific server endpoint, which is basically the one for getting a to-do by its ID. Now this is going to be as easy as saying result is going to be equal to CRUD dot, in this case we shall basically retrieve the to-do, and this is going to require us to provide a to-do ID. So we shall provide our to-do ID, and after doing that we shall basically come and return our result. So hoping that everything is working well, our server is going to restart, and we head over to the browser. So if we head over here to the browser, we're now going to go and get an ID for a specific to-do. So let's get the one for the to-do item that we created. If we copy that specific ID, so I'm going to copy this, and then I'll go ahead and provide it right here. So let's go and retrieve that specific ID. So provide our ID right here and execute. We shall now see that our ID is being returned right here, which is amazing. So let's go ahead and update as well as to do delete our specific to-do items. So to do that, what we're going to do is to first of all update our to-dos. Now I'll need some sort of like an extra pedantic model that's going to submit data for only updating an item. So for us to do that, we shall just come here and say that we shall have a class, and this is going to be our to-do update model. It will inherit from our base model, and this will basically have 2 fields, which are going to be the title as well as the content of our specific to-do item. So if we go ahead and provide this and we paste them right here, we can now go ahead and use this. So what I'm going to do is to head over to that specific endpoint for updating a to-do. We shall provide one extra argument or one parameter, which is going to be the update data. So this update data will be of the type update model, and then we shall be able to update our to-do. So let's go ahead and update our to-do. We shall say this is going to be result, which shall be equal to our CRUD dot update to-do, and this will basically take in the to-do ID. So shall provide the to-do ID as our to-do ID, and then we shall also provide our data. So our data in this case will be a dictionary containing the data as we've got it from our pydantic model. So in this case, we shall have our title, and this will be something like our to do, or it's actually update data.title. So update data.title, and then we shall access our content with. So this is going to be our update data dot content. So once we've been able to do this, then we are going to simply return the result. So I'll basically come and say return result, and this will be enough for us to update our to do. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for deleting. For deleting, we shall basically just say that our result is going to be equal to crud.delete to do. Sorry for that. And this will be taking in the to do ID. So our to do ID is going to be the to do ID that provided within our handler function. So in here, what you're going to do is to say that our result, actually we're just going to return our result, and then we shall also have to specify the status code here. So we're just going to come and say that our status code will be equal to the 204 no content status code. So now that we've been able to do most of our endpoints, our server is reloading, which is good. So if we refresh our Swagger UI, we're now going to see that we have our endpoint for basically updating a to-do. So if we come right here, all you need to do is to provide an ID for that to-do. So I'll paste the to-do item. So I think I do not have the ID, so I'll go back and create, well actually let me say I'll get all the to-dos. So if we list all our to-dos, I'm going to copy one ID of one specific to-do, which is our first to-do. And when I go right where we are updating our to-do, I can provide some content here. So let's say I will program, or let's say let's just call the title learn Python, and then we shall call the content, let's say program some web sockets. So let's go ahead and execute this. So when you execute this, we'll now see that it is returning a 200 status code, which is okay, and our updated to do item, which is fine. If we go ahead and basically delete our to do, so we can also go ahead and actually let's first confirm if we actually deleted or updated our to do. So if we confirm if we updated our to do, we now see that our first to do item, the one for which the ID we copied, we now see that it has been updated. When you try to delete it, then we shall come right here, try it out, we shall provide our ID. When you execute, we're now going to see that our to do item is going to be deleted. So if we go ahead and try to verify if it's deleted, we're now going to see that we only have 2 documents, just like you see right here. So this is the simple REST API that we built in this video. In this video, we've learned how to basically use AppWrite's database management, and we've constructed a simple REST API that makes use of the NoSQL database that AppWrite provides. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Don't forget to share this video with people that may need it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.